All right, guys. Today I'm joined by new defensive assistant coach Brady Grayvold. He's with St. Thomas University in Minnesota. Brady, I go back a little bit, right? You played for the Warhawks. You've been an assistant coach in the state of Wisconsin. Now, just like yesterday with Tony Schiffman, you're transitioning to the college level. Is that right?
Yep. So about mid-January, I took my current position up at the University of St. Thomas. So been up here since the 1st of February and loving it ever since.
Awesome. And we talked yesterday with Tony about transitioning in high school to college, and um, you're obviously in the middle of that. But what I wanted to talk to you today about is winning and losing, success and failure. Brady is an All-American player, former All-American player for the Warhawks. You obviously had some really good success with Sun Prairie at the start of your coaching career, and then not so much success last year or the last 2 years with Fort Atkinson as their head coach. So you've been on both sides of the spectrum now, right? Tell me what's the biggest thing you've learned from both success and failure?
Yeah, I think there's two things that you learn from it. And one, that winning is really, really hard, and that's not to be taken for granted. And I think I've grown more to appreciate that when people say, "Oh, that's an ugly win" or "That's a bad win." I think all wins should be celebrated. I think that's winning, especially in a game of football, is extremely difficult between the game planning and execution and practices, and then actually doing it all right on a Friday night. But I think the other thing it gives you is a wide range of perspective. Um, you go from playing at Whitewater where we win 37 consecutive games. I end up going to Sun Prairie. We end up going to a state championship my third year there. Go to Fort Atkinson, have one of the state's longest losing skids, and go to another, join college staff in a program that's won over 120 games or 115 games in the past 10 years and been to two national championships. So I think it gives you a wide range of perspectives that some people don't value or some people don't understand, that if you're in the game of football long enough, I think you're going to end up on both ends of the spectrum. That when you're at the top, it's really hard to stay at the top, but measuring growth and measuring the status of a program sometimes isn't always wins and losses. And I think that's one thing that it just gives you a wide range of perspective on, especially the game and coaches alike.
Sure, and that sort of brings me to my next question. When you're at these different ends of the spectrum, right, you really have to be conscious of what actually winning is, right? And you have to really think about should it be measured the same way everywhere?
Yeah, and I think that's one thing I always argue and talk to people is at the Division One level, especially the college football playoff, has kind of ruined the fact that people don't recognize what a good year is anymore for some of these programs. You look at programs such as an Alabama or a Clemson, should those be measured at the same level of a school, say in the Big 12, that's never had a track record of success, but the past 3 years have had winning seasons and been to bowl games? Should you measure at the D3 level? I mean, should we measure a Wisconsin Whitewater at the same level of a startup program that has improved over the past 5 years, but their coaching record might be sub 500? I mean, far sub 500. So I think that in terms of that, when people sit there and they want to measure coaches purely based on wins and losses, I think that's extremely short-sighted, because some of the best coaches I know, and I'm sure this is the same in your case, some of the best coaches I know are 500 coaches, but they're getting to 500 with far less resources, far less funding, far less athletes, and they're just doing a really good job of coaching. So I think that's one thing that a lot of people outside the game kind of get short-sighted on is, what makes a good program? What is a good coach? I've seen really good notorious programs that when they talk, you're like, you're not doing anything different than some of the guys I've talked to that are 5-5 coaches that are just, like I said, you're doing more with less. So I think that's one thing you have to do when evaluating programs, and especially when you look at numbers alone. I think one of the things we did this offseason is, for example, look at who's the best teams in the red zone. Well, you go look at some of the best teams in the red zone in America. They give up 80 opportunities in the red zone. That's not good, but they stop 40% of them or 40 of them, so they're 50% scoring in the red zone. So it's like just kind of that example of you really got to be careful when you're just looking at purely numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And so while you're at Fort Atkinson, you're a young head coach. Obviously, the first time you're in that role. Um, eh, you know, how has failure been maybe necessary for your growth, but how is also failure maybe necessary for a program's growth?
Yeah, and I think everyone's going to experience it. There's very few people in the game of football, especially, that have not experienced some level of failure. People forget. People like Bill Belichick have been fired before. People like Nick Saban got ran out of the NFL. So you're talking about arguably the two best coaches in the history of the game of football have experienced significant failure in their coaching career. So I think it's more not so much experiencing failure more than how are you going to handle it, how are you going to grow from it. And I think the one thing failure does is it confirms the things that you think you know and the things that you need to grow from. And I think that's a big part of personally what it's helped me a ton is when you go from a successful program like Whitewater and then you go to Sun Prairie, you think you know everything and you think you know a whole lot about football, and then you get your tail kicked in a little bit and you realize that you don't know as much as you think you know and that you need to continue to grow and you need to continue to learn. So I think that's a big part of, especially in the coaching field, that if you're going to get into this game, understand that it's not always going to be winning and it's not always going to go perfect. It's not always going to be great, but you still got to accept that and be able to grow from it.
What do you? What are some things now as you move back into a position coach role? Um, what are the things you realize as a head coach that maybe makes you appreciate former head coaches that you've been around?
I think the biggest thing, especially for anyone else that's young out there that would want to become a head coach, is the first thing that you realize that head coaching is really not coaching. I mean, when I say that, your head coach, and I never understood it until I got it, but Coach Kaminsky was at Sun Prairie said, listen, 90% of what I'm doing is off the field, handling stuff behind the scenes, the issues of planning, the sponsors, the boosters, the keeping parents happy, and doing all those types of things. And the other 10% is actually on the field stuff. And I guess you don't realize that until you get thrust into that role, that most of what you're doing is off the field, making sure the operation runs smooth. So that's a big thing, especially watching, higher levels of football, that a lot of head coaches are heavily involved in the coaching part of it, but how many tasks are behind the scenes that the average eye is not going to see have to get done to make something run successfully. I think the other thing that gives me a big appreciation for it, and especially being a good assistant, that from the head coach's perspective, if you have a bunch of assistants that just get the job done without having to be asked what to do or told how to do it or told when to get it done, specifically, I think that's a big advantage when a head coach is able to show up and assign tasks and say, we need this done. This needs to be done at a high level. You need to do this with your best intent and high levels of energy. I think that is extremely important to being an assistant, not having to be told every single little thing to do. If you see a need, fill the need. If you see something that needs to get done, go do it needs to get done. But I think that can apply at all levels, that, a good assistant coach will just do exactly what has been asked, but they're going to go above what has been asked and do exactly what needs to be done.
Awesome. Before I let you go, tell me this. You do a great job on social media, selling yourself, branding yourself. Obviously, you're transitioning now from the high school game to your first college job. What are some what is some advice you'd give to a young coach who's in your shoes, who wants to get into the college game, is in the high school level now? Why don't you just talk a little bit about any advice you'd have for them?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece of advice is you absolutely have to network, both social media wise, clinic wise, meeting other staff, meeting other young coaches. Kind of like Schiffman said yesterday, Twitter is an unbelievable thing if used correctly. And they said, especially down at the AFCA this past January, the quote was, your network is your net worth. And if you don't know people and if you aren't able to network, kind of like especially what Connor said, there hasn't been a job yet where I haven't known someone to get that job. Coach Kaminsky at Sun Prairie was a Whitewater grad. My student Todd at Fort Atkinson got to know the athletic director there. Coach Kuczynski one of the best defensive coordinators in America. I got to know him through social media, and he had an opening and called and said, "Hey, we want to bring you on." So I think being able to network, but also being able to put yourself out there and be authentic. If you're just posting stuff on social media or trying to network the whole time, and it's football only, and it's football all the time, people see through that. And people see that you're not authentic and not really showing, what you like to do in the background, or what are your other hobbies. I mean, especially in today's age, kids want to see who you are. They want to see what your true personality is. But I think the biggest thing people can do, especially if you're the high school game and want to get into the college game, is you got to go visit staffs. You got to make that connection. You got to go ask to work camps. You have to brand your kids. I think that's one of the challenges that a lot of people don't understand, especially as a high school coach, is you are the recruiting coordinator for your high school kids. So if you want your kids to go play college football, that's one of the easiest ways to get your name out there, especially if you're at a good high school. Is if you're a good high school coach and you promote your kids and you do it well and people see that you can push your kids to the next level. College coaches notice that. And I'm sure you do as a recruiter. You know the coaches that get their information to you and the ones that aren't getting their branding their kids or getting their information out there. But branding yourself and really promoting yourself to show what you can do is extremely important for making that transition, but just overall important. If you don't brand yourself, someone else is going to brand yourself for you. So you got to kind of get that done.
Awesome. Brady, I thank you for your time today. Thanks for coming on with Quarantine with Coaches. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right.